Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Tender Ready training session for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, looking at the CA procurement opportunity for school transport services, which is a code of 94727 batch 751. We've got a few people booked on today, so I will just leave it a couple of seconds for people to join. And whilst we're doing that, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. So my name is Gillian Askew. If you haven't joined one of the Go for Growth sessions before, either through the Combined Authority or in general, I'm one of three co-founding directors of a company called Go for Growth. And our job is to try and support the marketplace in their quest for sustainable growth in the public sector. So just a couple of bits of housekeeping. The session is being recorded today. And what every registered attendee will get at the end of this session is a copy of that recording, and the slide deck that I'm using today will also be circulated. We are on Zoom, so the chat function is enabled, as is the Q&A function. If you would like to ask any questions, please don't hesitate to do so. If you want to put them in the Q&A, I'll keep an eye on them as we go, but I have carved out some time towards the end as well for any questions. So we'll get started. We have just got 45 minutes set aside. If we don't need it all, that's fine, but we definitely won't run over. I know everybody's time is precious. So just wanted to run through initially the core components of really any procurement public sector tender. You might be well familiar with all of these, so I won't dwell on them too much, but these are the steps that you would see in any real public procurement process. There's an advertisement that happens initially. So in this case, for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, that would be on your tender. You would also find the opportunity on either Contracts Finder or Finder Tender Service. The difference between the two is really value. So Contracts Finder, not including VAT, is usually for opportunities above 25,000, so the lower end of the value spectrum. The Finder Tender Service must be in operation above threshold, and the threshold is where the regulations kick in, and the threshold for tenders on goods and services is 214,904, and that's inclusive of VAT. So the opportunity that we're looking at today has been advertised on your tender. Usually any values that are advertised are showing as a value, a maximum value, and they're not a guarantee of what you can achieve through a contract. Every process, and this is no different for the Combined Authority, will have a clarification process in there, and usually it's a time-sensitive process. So you can submit clarification questions up to a certain point in the process, and they will be answered also by a certain point in the process. Once you've asked any questions, you've completed all your pricing, quality, social value submissions, you will then submit your tender for scoring and evaluation. Every contract will have an evaluation criteria, so it must be transparent to a bidder how your bid submission will be scored. And I'm going to show you the evaluation criteria that is relevant to this particular opportunity. Once that scoring process has been done, we get to a point in the process where there's an intent to award. So usually your feedback letter will come out to say whether you've been successful for all of the lots or some of the lots that you might have applied for. If you've been unsuccessful, you'll get your feedback also. And then you'll enter into a standstill period. Standstill period is mandatory above threshold, but often it can be used under threshold as well in a voluntary capacity. But it is changing under the regulations, but it is, as it stands at the minute, 10 clear days. Also, just to let you know, that Finder Tender Service that we talked about in terms of advertisement, the new regulations for the Procurement Act 2023 come into force on Monday next week, the 24th of February. And what that means is the Finder Tender Service will actually become the central digital platform. And that's where, going forward, we will find all of our opportunities that are above threshold for the public sector. And that's where also we'll be able to enter some of our supplier information through what's called a supplier information system. And that information in the future will pull through to the individual procurement portals. This contract is being let under the current regulations, which is Public Contract Regulations of 2015, so PCR 15. Some of the changes don't affect this particular procurement because it is live prior to the regulatory change. Once we've got through that standstill period, then it is going then to contract award. And so under that headline steps, if you like, what you will normally get is an invitation to tender. And in this West Yorkshire Combined Authority, there are two invitations to tender. There's one for the bid itself, but there's also a social value invitation to tender document. There'll be some sort of standard selection questionnaire or SQ, and I'm actually going to do a live demo of the SQ on this session today because it is being done online. Usually it will be done as part of just the manual process of box filling in the ITT or the submission document. But actually for this opportunity, it's being done online. So I'll show you that in a second. What you'll have also in any process is a specification. The West Yorkshire Combined Authority call that a statement of requirements. And that does exactly what it says on the tin. It tells you what the contracting authority, in this case, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, what they want to buy, what's important to them, why it's important to them. And there's also something called an evaluation criteria, that scoring criteria that I talked about, and often there are weightings in those questions. So one question might have a weighting of 30%, one might have a weighting of 20%, etc. And those weightings help us to work out actually which are the most important questions to in this case, the combined authority. Where would we put most of our effort? There might also be things called threshold questions where you have to reach a minimum score in order for the rest of your bid to be scored. Or there'll be pass-fail questions in there where if you pass, you continue. If you fail, you don't. You will always have quality or technical questions, pricing questions. You will also sometimes see social value questions either separately or as part of the quality and technical question set. There will obviously be legal terms and conditions for the public sector. And then there is that feedback process that bolts at the end. So all bidders are notified of their success or lack of, and you should get your score versus the winning score. Under the new regulations, there's something called an assessment summary, which will give you sufficient detail really to help you improve and understand what the gaps were in your particular submission. It's largely the same under the current regulations when we're above threshold, in that the feedback that you get above threshold should be detailed enough to give you a very clear view of where those gaps were in your scoring and what you can do to improve them in the future. So that's what the feedback process is all about. What you can see on the screen, items 2, 3, 5 and 6 are blue and underlined. They are live links to Lunch and Learn sessions that Go for Growth ran last March in 2024. We are also running them again this March 2025. And if you go to our website or to our Eventbrite page, you'll be able to book onto those sessions and come along. But if you click on those links, it will take you to the videos of last year's session. This year's session will be centred around the Procurement Act 2023. So there will be some differences this year, which might be useful. So in terms of this particular invitation to tender, this particular procurement opportunity, what are the documents that you've effectively got in the system? And I'll show you in the system those documents. You may well be familiar with this already. There is an invitation to tender, as I said, and also a social value invitation to tender. What we have is the statement of requirements, that specification at Appendix 1. Oh, excuse me. The pricing document can be found at Appendix 3B. The contract, those terms and conditions, is at Appendix 5. All the lot information, including timetabling, can be found at Appendix 7. And the TUPE confidentiality agreement is at Appendix 8. Excuse me, I am just about to cough again. Forgive me, sorry, I don't have a drink. My coffee's run out. There is also something called the Social Value Local Needs Analysis from March 2024. One thing I will say about the confidentiality agreement, oh, I'm so sorry, excuse me. on TUPE is please sign that or immediately if you haven't already. You can't get access to the TUPE information. For those that don't know what TUPE is, I'm sure most of you do, but for those that don't, it's the transfer of undertakings and then in brackets, protection of employment regulations. And they effectively protect employees if they're transferring from one organisation to another. If TUPE applies, it's a complicated piece of legislation. If it applies, it would mean that staff may be transferring to your organisation if you win a lot that you didn't have before, for example. So in order to be able to understand your obligations and the burdens that are applied under that legislation, you do need to sign that confidentiality agreement as soon as you possibly can. So if you haven't done that, do that already. I'll probably say that again whilst we're going. So what do you need to submit for this bid? You would need to submit that Appendix 8, the TUPE confidentiality agreement. I'm labouring the point on it being urgent, but it definitely is not a document that you want to request right at the 11th hour, because depending on what's in there, it could make a real difference to what you bid for, how you bid for it, and certainly how you price it. You also need to complete the selection questionnaire online. You need to complete Appendix 3A, the quality questions, 3B, the pricing document, Appendix 4, the form of tender, and then you will be submitting your social value proposal in the social value portal. If you're bidding for swimming services, you would also need to populate Appendix 7, which is in the lot information. So for all other services specified by the combined authority in Appendix 7, a timetable doesn't need to be submitted. So for swimming services, you need to add the proposed pick-up and drop-off times for those services. You don't need to do that for all other services, but you do need to confirm in question 8.3 of the SQ section 8, and I'm going to show you that in two ways, that you can adhere to those times within a certain parameter, or if not, submit an alternative timetable with your quality response for review during the evaluation period. So let me just hop over to your tender. So let me go over here. So you hopefully will have had a look at this already. So you'll have seen all of this. All the documents are in here. So you can see all of those documents. The lot information is there at Appendix 7 that I talked about. All of the information that you need are held in these documents. You can download them all. But the SQ would normally be held in the ITT. And if you're struggling with it electronically, please do submit a clarification question to let the combined authority know that you're struggling with it electronically. But I'm just going to show you quickly how to do it under the current system. So you will be in this part of the tender where you can view the quote and tender, where you can access the documents, you can access any Q&A that's happened, etc. And where you're looking at my response down here, you can see that there is the qualification questions here. So we need to click on answer questions. And effectively what we do is we literally fill it out online. So in this section, we've got 34 questions to answer. We can save our progress as we go. So we've got 33 questions not answered because we've answered the first one. And we literally work through all of the information that is captured in here is exactly the same as it would be if you were writing it manually in a Word document. You're simply doing it on the system. One thing is to make sure that you do save it. If you complete a page, you can go save and next to the next page. What it shouldn't let you do is submit if you haven't completed all the questions. So it will tell you how many you have to answer. And if I go down to section 8, let me just find it down here. So if I go into section 8, I'll just let that open. You can see here that capacity requirements for all of the routes that you're bidding for as outlined in Appendix 7. So that's where you would be answering questions. Can you meet the requirements? So in section 8, all of those things are there, and I'll show you those things in a bit more detail. But effectively what you're doing, and if you want to move about in sections, you click on the circle there to tick it. If you have answered anything in this section before you move it back to another section, you must save it before you move anywhere. Otherwise, you will lose the work that you've done. So hopefully that gives you some confidence. If you go save and next, it will move you on to the next section. So I've still got 33 questions to answer in there. It will move you on to the next bit. So contact details, there are 8 questions to answer in there, 6 questions to answer in the bidding model, 33 in the potential supplier information. So you can see each section as it's coming. Okay. There are in total what we saw, and if I just exit here, excuse me again. There are 121 questions to answer. So do carve out some time to do that piece of work. Oh, forgive me, sorry, I think I'm about to keel over. I have just noticed on the chat that somebody's saying they submitted the cheapy paperwork a couple of days ago and have not received a response. I will pass that through to the Combined Authority as a comment based on this webinar today. So I will let them know that they're coming through. And we'll see if we can expedite that out. It should be a fairly quick response turnaround to get the TUPE confidential, to get the TUPE information if you've signed the confidentiality agreement. So thank you for flagging that. So the key dates in this particular procurement, hopefully that SQ demonstration has been helpful. What I will say actually also, if you have any issues outside of this webinar today, my contact details are on the slide deck, so please do get in touch. I'd be more than happy to help you navigate that process if you need any further help. So, and that's open to everybody, so please do feel free to get in touch. In terms of the core dates in this particular procurement, the ITT was issued on the 14th of February. That clarification question deadline for you as bidders, for us as bidders, is the 28th of February 2025, so next Friday at 12 p.m. We won't be able to ask questions after that point. So if you do have any clarification questions or any points of clarity that you need, make sure that you get those questions through the Your Tender system into the Combined Authority before 12 o'clock noon on the 28th of February 2025. The Combined Authority is committed to responding to those questions at the very latest by the 7th of March 2025, also at 12 p.m. What you will see almost certainly is that they'll be answering questions very organically as they go. One tip from me would always be to check the clarification question log, if there is one, before you submit a question, because it could be that someone else has already submitted it, and it's far quicker to get a response through checking if it's already there or not. If it's not, obviously, continue to ask the question. The submission deadline for this tender is the 18th of March at 12 p.m. And then that evaluation period will start. So and then completion of evaluation standstill period will commence in May 2025. And you'll see that the rest of the dates are not exact at this point. They are still to be confirmed. Standstill period is due to end also in May 2025. Contracts issued to successful tenderers will be the following month in June 25. Contracts signed and returned to the Combined Authority is likely to be no later than also June 25. And the contract start date and commencement of services is set at the 1st of September 2025. So I wanted to just run through some of the selection criteria with you that's in that section 8. So insurance, you will be asked to confirm that you either have now or that you will obtain prior to commencement of the contract, and we know that that's the 1st of September, a 5 million employer liability, public liability of 10 million, and there is a note to say that that would be evidenced at contract award stage. So if you are awarded any lots under the procurement, you will be asked to evidence that public liability insurance. Motor vehicles liability, and that's as required under the Road Traffic Act of 1988. At 8.2, you'll also be asked to confirm if your organisation has fewer than 250 employees. And you'll be asked to confirm that you can meet your obligations under GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. And that will be a self-cleaning yes or no. You'll also be asked to confirm at 8.4 that you will adhere to the timetable proposed by the Combined Authority for the route or routes that you are bidding for. If an alternative timetable is proposed, you will also be required to confirm that this will arrive no earlier than 30 minutes before school starts and will depart no later than 20 minutes after school finishes. At 8.5, as you saw on the SQ system, you'll be asked to confirm that you can meet the minimum capacity requirements for all the route or routes that you are bidding for, and they're outlined in Appendix 7, the routes and lots. And you'll also be asked at 8.6 around your vehicle standards, you'll be asked to confirm that the vehicles that you'll use for the delivery of services meet the minimum vehicle requirements for all the route or routes that you are bidding for. So, statement of requirement, let's dive into this a little bit more. What is it? I mean, the specification on the statement of requirements does effectively what it says on the tin. It is basically a description of what the contracting authority wants to buy. It is a crucial document in any procurement, including this one. And obviously, if you've bid before and you have got your rhythm down, if you're new to bidding, and it's a very personal thing, but one of the advice that we would always give is one of your first jobs would be to read through that statement of requirements carefully and thoroughly, making a note of any questions that you might have that would go through that clarification process, noting any evidence that you have that you can use as part of your bid submission, and also making a note of any gaps that you might have in being able to deliver on that statement of requirements or specification. If you do find that you've got gaps, the question you'll be asking yourself is how substantial those gaps are and how meaningful to your bid submission will be those gaps. Ultimately, the specification is what the Combined Authority want delivering, and a combination of that and what you write in your bid submission will be what actually gets delivered. So it can be really important to figure out how much of that statement of requirements you can meet and if there are any gaps in there. It's a really useful way of creating those clarification questions as well. When you complete the technical or quality questions, your answers should link back to the specification. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show the Combined Authority how we'll deliver the statement of requirements. And effectively, the quality questions or technical questions are testing your ability to deliver what's needed. So referencing back to that statement of requirements can really help to enhance our scores. It is worth noting that you should only be tested in those quality questions, in that evaluation criteria, something that is within that statement of requirements. You shouldn't be being tested on something that isn't included in the statement of requirements. So it's rare that you would be, but it's worth knowing that anyway. We have evaluation criteria. I've gone over this a little bit. There are two criteria. So selection criteria, which is in the selection questionnaire online for this particular procurement. That's looking at you as a business. It's looking at your financial economic standing. It's looking at your capability, your competency, your history, your insurances, accreditations, etc., etc. Evaluation is about how you will deliver this contract going forward. So it's thinking about what you will do. And the best evaluations that I have seen is where you are talking through what you will do and backing that up with evidence. So if you're a new organisation to the service, you might not be able to say, I have done this before and here is what I've done, but you'll be showing that governance infrastructure that you have sat around what you will do to show how you will effectively be able to provide confidence that you can deliver. We would recommend with evaluation, the scoring, and I'll show you the criteria in a second, that you get someone else to read over the bid submission before you submit it. And what you're looking for is what's in the question, what's in the statement of requirements, have we provided evidence, have we answered the question, at that kind of process. So if it's really hard to mark your own homework, so if you've got someone else in your organisation or multiple people that can do that for you, so much the better. So this is the evaluation criteria for this particular bid. You'll find it on page 18 or section 23.4 of the invitation to tender. I'm sure that you have already had a look at it. Obviously, as bidders, we want to be right up at the top in good or excellent if we can. And what the evaluation criteria does is gives us a definition of how we would be scoring that. So to be excellent, we would be meeting all of the requirements in good. So above average demonstration by the tenderer of the relevant ability, understanding, experience, skills, resource, and quality measures required to provide the services. The response will be providing sufficient level of detail and evidence of a proven track record in delivering similar services so as to give the CA, the combined authority, confidence that the tenderer will be able to deliver the services in a way which fully complies with all material aspects with the combined authority's requirements. And for excellent, in addition, the tenderer will be providing exceptional demonstration of its ability. It will be offering additional value over and above the combined authorities requirements are set out in the specification with evidence to support that response. The evaluation criteria is there to help you navigate that score. So if you're reading back over your submission, if you are saying, what score might I give myself? Obviously, we don't want to be down the bottom at 0, meaning actually we've not provided the relevant information. We haven't backed it up with evidence. We've failed to demonstrate that we've got the experience, the skills, etc. So you're looking for in your answers where you are demonstrating your experience, where you're demonstrating and evidencing your skills, your resources, those quality measures, not just talking about it. And if you're talking about it, talk about it in sufficient detail so that it makes sense to the evaluator. Writing a sentence like, we have quality measures in place, is not going to cut it. What we want is, we have quality measures in place. Here are some examples. Here is how our quality measurement process works. Here is an example of it. Here is how we measure and monitor ourselves in terms of the quality service that we provide. So you want to ask yourself the so what question always. So have I said that I do it? And if I've said that I do it, have I shown my evaluator how I do it? Have I backed that how up with any evidence that I might have available to myself? And so answering questions, this is a process that we use, and this is consistent in all of our teaching around answering quality questions. And I've got an example on the next slide for us. So what we're effectively trying to do is break down the question into the doing elements, the verb elements, if you like. There are some things on that slide that will feel super obvious. So when I say to you, make sure you only answer the question that's asked, that feels like a really silly thing to say, I'm sure, but actually that is what we're obliged to do. We only want to answer the question that we've been asked. We don't want to tell them stuff that is irrelevant to the question because it will not enhance our scores. We're only being scored on our answers versus the question that's been asked. And that can be a funny psychology to deal with, which is why it can be good to get someone that's not written it to read it over as well. We need to make sure that we ask that so what question often. I've said that I do something. Have I said how I do it? Have I evidenced it? And if you're asked for any documents, if you were asked for an implementation plan, an insurance document, etc., make sure that you upload it. If you are using documents as evidence and you're referring to it in your answer, make sure that you also upload it so that you can get the document to the evaluator. If tenders use a word count, the combined authority, local authority, whoever the contracting authority would be, they'll be strict at cutting off on the word count. So the advice is use it really wisely. Don't waffle. Don't use superfluous words, etc. Sometimes there's a page count. If there's a page count, there's likely to be a font size that you are specified that you can use. So look at the constraints in the questions. If there are any, the basic advice is just make sure that you are compliant with whatever that constraint is. So here is one of the questions that's in this particular tender. What I've highlighted in yellow are those doing elements that I talked about. So we need to provide details of the total number of drivers that will or are employed for the delivery services, the ratio of spare drivers available to cover things like absenteeism and emergencies, the number of drivers with the appropriate licenses and certifications, for carrying out that regulated activity involving children and young people. And then in 2B, we'll be detailing the training that drivers take. So that will include, but not be limited to, safeguarding, health and safety, customer relations, and any other training that you give to drivers. And you should explain how the training is delivered in practice, including the frequency or regularity, and if any external training providers are used, and how outcomes and completion of training are monitored. It also asks us to summarise any safeguarding or health and safety policies and attach full copies of them, and explain how your organisation ensures compliance with these policies and training requirements. So we have a constraint in there, which I've put in green at the bottom. So we have a maximum 2 sides of A4 at 12-point aerial. Attachments don't count towards the response length limit. So when you upload your health and safety and safeguarding policy, they don't count towards the page count. So 2 sides of A4 at 12 PT aerial. And we need to use those 2 pages to answer all of those bits in yellow. Also up in 2A, I've highlighted in green that Appendix 1 in the Statement of Requirements talks through PCV driver license, cleared DBS, certificate of professional competence card, etc. So it's referring you back to a part of the Statement of Requirements. So our job is to, when we read through our question answer, have we put in all of those bits in yellow? And this is something that I physically do when I'm bidding. I highlight the parts of the question that I need to make sure I can almost tick off in the answer to make sure I've included all of the relevant information that whoever the contracting authority is that requires it. So I'm just going to finish up before I open up for questions with a couple of things. So there are some common pitfalls in bids that every organisation will fall foul of at some point. I've already talked about not answering the question. I know it feels obvious, but we must answer and only answer the question that has been asked. We must make sure that we submit all of the documentation that is asked of us or that we are referring to as evidence as part of our submission. Caveating is an interesting one. Unless you are specifically asked about different scenarios, we would always suggest that you should not caveat a bid. So you wouldn't be saying, if it will cost this if I do X, but it will cost this if I do Y, because that's very difficult for evaluators. So unless you're expressly asked for different scenarios, we would always suggest that you steer clear of caveating. That specification match is a process that we think is really fundamental. So we would always advise you go through that statement of requirements or specification and make sure that you can deliver what the contracting authority is after. Now, we would never say that reusing previous bids is a no-no. Actually, we know that everyone is super busy. So often it can be useful to pull information out of previous bids, but it comes with the obvious health warning of make sure that what you're using is relevant to the current bid and that any references to previous bids or previous clients, etc., are removed. So just health check, just sense check that what you're using is appropriate. A lack of evidence will almost always pull scores down. So what almost every contracting authority is looking for is the evidence to back up what we're saying in the actual bid. So it's almost never going to be a situation where evidence is going to hurt us. If we include evidence, it should only strengthen our bid submission. Make sure that if there's any key information that is asked for, that we include it. Missing information will detract from scores. Keep aware of that word or page count. Don't make any assumptions. So don't assume that the person evaluating your bid is a specialist in transport in this. So if you're using acronyms or technical terminology, jargon, make sure that you spell it out. Don't assume that if you're using an acronym that the person who's reading it will understand what that is. So make sure that it's really clear what you want your evaluator to know. And don't assume, even if you're an incumbent bidder, that an evaluator can take anything into account from what you already do. If you want something to be scored, we must write it down in the bid. If it's not written down, it can't be taken into account. So please don't assume that even if you're an incumbent provider, any of that can be taken into account. It can if you include it in your bid, but if it's not in the bid submission, it can't be included. And that selection questionnaire compliance, if we haven't got all our ducks in a row, or we're not prepared to get all our ducks in a row, so if we're not prepared to, or we can't for any reason take out the necessary insurances that would be required at contract start date, then we might find ourselves non-compliant to the selection questionnaire as well. So it's worth having a look through that SQ early to make sure that you've got everything that you need. And finally, some key messages for this bid, and actually they'll probably stand true for any bid. Read all of the documents carefully. In this slide deck, you've got a note of the key dates, but make a note in your calendars or whatever so that you don't fall foul of being late for anything. Ask any questions you have through that clarification process, remembering that the deadline is the 28th of February at 12 o'clock. Check your safeguarding requirements. There is more detail on safeguarding in the contract terms, so check that you have your safeguarding requirements in place. Another question about the TUPE confidentiality agreement, make sure that you've signed it and that you've got back the necessary information. And if TUPE would apply, that you understand the implications of this. You might need to seek some advice on it. If you're a member of your local chambers or the Federation of Small Businesses, their legal helplines might be able to help you with TUPE. If you require any additional help with your social value submission, we're running another workshop on the 25th on Tuesday at 12 p.m. looking specifically at the social value requirements for this particular opportunity. So if you would like to come along to that, the Eventbrite link is in there as well. And then finally, have you uploaded everything that you need for submission? That's on slide 6 of this deck. And then check, double check and triple check everything before you hit the submit buttons. On the last 2 slides, there's just our contact details. There's lots of resources in Go for Growth that might be helpful for you. On our website, if you go to the membership resources section of our website, there's over 200 resources, and we have a remote online assistant called Rosa. If you just ask Rosa what help you need, she will go through all of those documents for you and present you with the ones that match your requirements. So don't feel that you have to, you can filter the documents and see what the full list looks like, but don't feel you have to. You can go on there and find what you need. Past tutorials that we've done on bid skills are in our video library as well, and my contact details are there. And if you did want a Teams one-to-one with me to chat through SQ or any part of the process elements of this bid, you can use my bookable calendar there as well. Just choose me from the list and choose a time that's convenient for you. And if you would like to stay in touch with us in Go for Growth for other opportunities or for other workshops that we're doing, etc., you can sign up to our newsletter. We don't spam, we promise. And of course, under GDPR, you must be able to opt out at any time. And of course, you can with our newsletter as well. And so that's everything I wanted to cover for today. I will just stop sharing. Forgive me again for not being able to stop coughing at certain points today. I'm very sorry about that. Hopefully it hasn't created any issues for getting the messaging across today. I'm just going to check the chat. I can't see anything other than the original comment in the chat around TUPE. There isn't anything in the Q&A as it stands at the minute. So hopefully that has been useful for you. If you do have any further questions, please do get in touch. You can either email me or you can book a Teams session with me. I will send both the slide deck and the recording out, if not today, by close of play on Monday. And if you do want to join that social value session on Tuesday, please feel free. And I'll also pass through to Combined Authority just the prompt on the chat that came up around the TUPE confidentiality agreement and getting the TUPE information out as quickly as possible. So I'll pass that through. If there is nothing else today, the last thing I wanted to say is thank you for taking out the time to join me today. I do hope it's been of some use and some help, and I hope you have a good rest of your Friday. Thank you ever so much. I'll see you all soon.